Anti-Poverty Association is poor. The reason, according to its president, Marjorie Hartling, is of its members for themselves. But the federal government has come to the rescue with money and advice.
NAPO was set up 7 years ago when the worldwide energy crisis started adding to the grief of poverty-stricken families everywhere. NAPO became the most active lobby for the poor in Canada. It's taken on credit companies and big corporations like Bell Canada on behalf of the poor. Now it's facing financial disaster. The debt has reached $100,000. NAPO's annual budget is more than double that amount. Marjorie Hartling, the executive director, says her decision to get involved in a housing program with CMHC caused the financial problem. NAPO worked as a go-between to get government funding for improvements to housing for the poor. She says more than 1,000 families have been helped. After a meeting with officials of the Federal Department of Health and Welfare, help is now on the way for NAPO.
There is a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We have obtained yesterday in a meeting with the Department of Health and Welfare their agreement to assist us in having an audit carried out, our own audit, and in having the access to a financial management consultant. And at this point in time, with all of that extra help being given to us, I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to resolve our problems.
The Health Department has also agreed to release the second part of NAPO's annual grant to help pay off its debts. NAPO is optimistic about its survival, but as Mrs. Hartling puts it, that depends on a little luck and a lot of hard work. Judy Morrison, CBC News, Ottawa.
Big Brother.
Growing and growing rapidly. And Ma Bell wants us to dig a little deeper again. The telecommunications giant has applied to the CRTC for a 30% hike in residential rates. Bell blames the general state of the economy and the high interest levels for the proposed increase. Consumer advocates accuse the company of turning the telephone into almost a luxury item, one that an increasing number of low-income families will not be able to afford.
It's becoming an annual tradition with Bell Canada. Last year at this time, the telephone company asked the CRTC for the right to bump household rates by 23%. The regulatory body allowed a 13% hike to go through. 1 year later, Bell is looking for a 30% increase. Translated into dollars and cents, the monthly home phone bill would rise from the present rate of $8.45 to $11. The charge for a business phone would jump from $26.15 to $36.60. Bell claims the proposed increases are justified because it faces the same economic pressures as everyone else and must also compete to attract investment dollars.
Well, Bell, like everyone else, is affected by very sharp increases in inflation, by record high interest rates, and the fact that they reflect in every aspect of our business. And we have to compete with other people in the marketplace for investment money and so on, and if we're not paying an adequate return on the dollar, we may not be seen as a competitive investment by the investor.
Consumer groups admit they are getting tired of using the same argument over and over, but they feel the family existing on a fixed income is gradually being denied access to what has become accepted as an essential service.
The small income earner, when they're faced with Bell's increases, the smaller their income, the greater the blow it is. The less likely they are to be able to even afford phone service. It's coming to a point in time where you've got to choose between food on the table and having a telephone.
The National Anti-Poverty Organization also points out that with every mention of a rate increase, a conflict of interest becomes more and more acute. In its eyes, there's simply no compatibility between providing a public service and providing a competitive return on the investment dollar. Al?
Bell would also like to raise its price.
Developed its own energy policy, which it will soon take to the public with meetings. And the fact that a new pricing policy will be drawn up before the meetings conclude has not discouraged that organization.
The National Anti-Poverty Organization is opposed to any policy which uses increased prices as an incentive to conserve. NAPO, which calls itself the voice of Canada's organized poor, makes the case that price hikes will shift an unfair proportion of the burden onto the poor. In a brief sent to the Prime Minister, MPs, and Senators about a week ago, the group proposes a system which it says combines both fair pricing and rationing to achieve self-sufficiency. Under it, the government would issue credits to individuals, allowing them to use an energy amount geared to achieving self-sufficiency. The price of the allotted energy would remain at current levels, but any use beyond the allotment would be priced at world levels. Meetings in 15 cities are planned to bring the proposal to the public. The first will be in British Columbia in about 2 weeks, the last at the end of January. But by then, a new energy pricing policy will almost certainly be drawn up by the government.
I realize that, the timing is very difficult. What we're looking toward is the hope to affect the long-term energy policy that the government has spoken about coming down with. We're calling for a referendum, and I believe that the people in this country are just fed up enough with all the talk about filling the oil companies' pockets with gold and even filling our government's pockets with gold, that they are concerned enough that they want to have something done.
The Prime Minister has pledged already to help those who can't afford to absorb price hikes. Despite that, the anti-poverty group says it will continue to bring pressure on politicians. Sue Simpson, CJOH News.
Meanwhile, the
On Bell Canada announcing yesterday that rates for party line users will be reduced. The announcement followed a decision of the CRTC, and today the National Anti-Poverty Organization welcomed that news, saying that once and for all, officials recognize that the telephone is an essential service.
In Ottawa alone, 4,000 households have party lines which serve 2 customers at a time. Because of the CRTC decision yesterday, all Bell Canada customers in Ontario and Quebec on 2-party service will be given a rate reduction of about 10%. In this area, that means an average savings of about 50 cents a month. Party lines of 2 now cost $5.30 a month. On March the 1st, the cost will be cut to $4.80, the same rate now being charged for party lines of 4. The cost of a private line is $7.50 a month. The National Anti-Poverty Organization has been fighting for years to get Bell Canada to introduce a so-called budget service. The director feels this small savings to party line users will amount to a great deal for people on low or fixed incomes, but she still has a number of concerns. For one thing, she says the security deposit charged in some cases is exorbitant. It can be as high as several $100s.
We hope that Bell won't continue its practice of requiring heavy security deposits from low-income people before they give them access to a budget telephone service, because they still probably can't afford to have phone service if they're going to have to pay a large security deposit.
Bell Canada holds several $1 million in security deposits. No interest is paid on those deposits, and in some cases they're so high that individuals can't raise the money to pay them. That means doing without a phone in the home. The reduction of 2-party service rates may make the residential phone less expensive for people on low or fixed incomes. It certainly doesn't amount to a windfall savings, $12 a year. However, as long as Bell Canada continues to charge security deposits ranging from $50 to several $100s a year, the residential phone will continue to be a luxury some people will never be able to afford. Judy Morrison, CBC News, Ottawa.
The National Anti-Poverty Organization income tax, and to solve the problem, they published a tax guide. Now, the only problem is trying to find a copy. They're so successful, they're all sold out.
The National Anti-Poverty Organization called their guide Putting the Puzzle Together, and according to the organization's executive director, this year the puzzle is trickier than ever.
Some of the taxpayers have received some new kinds of income tax forms called a T1 special, which is essentially a shorter form of tax return. But it's not good for certain groups of people. Another thing is that people have been mailed out the mortgage interest tax credit forms, and those are not valid. It never became law.
Who can the book help? Who is it aimed at?
Middle income or lower income people, or people who are on fixed incomes, and those primarily who are working for a salary. It's designed to assist them in filling out a tax form, in deciding what type of tax form they should fill out, and in particular encouraging them to apply for the tax credits they should be entitled to.
Is that a problem, people not applying for tax credits that they deserve?
They decide themselves that they wouldn't be eligible, so they don't apply.
So in a way, the very people who a lot of these credits are designed to help don't make effective use of the help.
That's right. They neglect to apply for them, and it's especially important in provinces where there are provincial tax credits. Of course, there's the new federal child tax credit, and anyone with children should be applying for that tax credit.
What's unique about the book?
It is right up to date. It deals with the new tax forms that are out, this new T1 special form and the T1 general. It deals with provincial tax credits as well as federal. And it's accurate. We've had it reviewed by Revenue Canada, and it is accurate.
With 3,000 copies of the book printed and you're completely sold out, how can I get a copy?
Well, we're doing our best to overcome this problem. We realize that there's many more people would like to receive the book, and we hope within 2 weeks to have some more copies available.
Judy Darling, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal election killed the...
Pleasure for me to welcome to present Marjorie Hartling, who is the Executive Director of the National Anti-Poverty Organization. Tell me a little bit of the history of the organization, where it got started and its original aims.
Well, the National Anti-Poverty Organization actually formed as a result of the first and only National Poor People's Conference. It was held in Toronto in January of 1971. And the delegates who attended that conference were selected from organizations across the country that were working with and were themselves poor people. The organization formed because they decided as delegates that they wanted a national voice, that there was an urgent need to develop nationally and provincially, for that matter, the kind of network that had not existed until that time. And in 1971, there was about 250 organizations in Canada that were formed of and consisted of poor people.
Has the role changed of the organization since that time 9 years ago?
Yes, it's changed somewhat. It's changed as a result of the economic situation, I guess. For example, a couple of years ago, we noticed that many of our groups were starting to have to close their doors, primarily due to funding cuts or to a total lack of support from the communities. And as a result, we tried to take the individuals who had formerly belonged to those groups and put them together into some of our regional organizations. And so we expanded to include individuals in the memberships in the local groups.
What would be your main focus? What types of things are you working on right now?
Well, we've been working very hard to develop some what we call self-development projects. That's one area that we're extremely interested in. We're looking at things like cottage industries, development of employment for young people, development of enterprises which people can participate in whether they are tied to the home or they're not. We haven't got too far along in pursuing this. We tried to get the government to assist us by setting up what we called a self-development corporation, and they have been considering it for about the last 4 years now. So we decided that there was no sense in waiting. We would try to develop something ourselves. Another area that we're very actively involved in is a housing program. We started a pilot project 3 years ago in Newfoundland And to date, we have assisted in the repairing of over 1,000 homes on the northern peninsula of Newfoundland, and assisted people to obtain new homes where their homes were unrepairable. And then after having done all of the repair work in a community, gone on to work with some of the major community concerns and to assist those communities to develop both economically and socially.
So you're starting to see the fruits of your efforts?
Yes, we are. It's really a pleasure to go up in the northern peninsula of Newfoundland now and to see communities where the houses look strong and sturdy and not the kind of place we first saw. It's really encouraging.
What percentage of the Canadian population is living below the poverty level?
Well, unfortunately, it's going up and down. The poverty line itself, there's more than one. Everybody seems to have a definition of poverty, just not a solution for it.
Yeah.
The Senate poverty line is the one which we feel most accurately reflects poverty in Canada, and that is approximately 1/3 of the people living in Canada. And of course, unemployment has people drifting in and out of poverty too. And that's quite a crisis in the lives of a person to suddenly find themselves unemployed. It's very difficult to live with.
1/3 of the Canadian population. That's something you don't hear very much. Does government show enough concern for the plight of the poor?
Frankly, I don't think anybody shows enough concern because I think it is a problem that can be tackled. Furthermore, I think it affects our whole country. I mean, as long as we have poor people in the country, then the standard that the country achieves is only as high as those people are able to achieve. They're the bottom line. And I think there's a lot more we could be doing about it. I think there's a lot of good ideas, a lot of innovative ideas that could be implemented and aren't. But there's not enough concern.
Public awareness, therefore, is probably one of the goals of NAPO.
Very definitely. We find people, sitting within a block of destitute families, and simply because they're generally hidden behind closed doors in their homes, they're ignored. They're ignored as a part of society. They're not part of the organizations of society, and they're not invited to be. They're socially ostracized and ignored because you feel, well, if you ignore it long enough, it might go away. It won't.
I thank you for coming here and making at least some people more aware of what's happening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. We'll be back with more on Presents in just a moment.